Hello, I'm Dr. Missick. I want to talk about some campaign events I've been involved with. On December the 7th, I went to the Liberty County Republican Party, and they had Chris Rousseau, and he's from Texans for Strong Borders. So this is a good event that I went to, and I recommend his work. Um, that's the biggest issue that we're facing right now. It's destroying our country, the open borders, not just with the burden of millions, 10 to 15 or more million illegal aliens who cross the country under Joe Biden. That's a burden. I mean, now these people going to New York and Chicago and these formerly sanctuary cities, it's like, the mayor of New York, Mayor Adams, it's like, we can't afford this. This is going to destroy our city. Our city's imploding from the weight of the open border, and all these people don't even have a legal right to be here, draining our city, the biggest, most famous city in the world, of its resources and bringing us into precipitous decline. So you try to talk to people for decades about the negative effects of the open borders. People wouldn't listen to you. They try to silence you, falsely accuse you of being racist. But now we're seeing the negative effects, and I think that, man, I hate to see this to happen to our country. But now, I mean, one of the good things is that these people in these deep blue, heavily Democrat areas are starting to understand what we in Texas have to deal with, and they're starting to reevaluate their support for open borders, which is actually in the end is detrimental. So it's a very good presentation, and they've been having really great speakers in the Republican Party in Liberty. We had just recently we had Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, and they gave a powerful presentation. I thought was very good about reckless spending that's going to destroy us. So that was a very good presentation, very informative. So I really appreciate the good speakers are getting at the Liberty County Republican Party, and of course we spoke about Colony Ridge. I want to have that audio. I had a conversation, engaged Mr. Rousseau about the problem with Colony Ridge, and what we need to realize. Apparently, Ernest Bales is saying, oh yes, with well, first off, he hit it. This the legislation that created Colony Ridge. He was like, well, Colony Ridge already existed before I created this legislation to create it again. It's like, well, the legal foundation basis of Colony Ridge came from Ernest Bales' legislation, HB 4341. And he can't deny it. He can't deny it. He tried to. It's like, oh, I didn't create Colony Ridge. It's not my fault. And it's like, what is this municipality management district? Why did you allow Trey Harris to have his own fiefdom, his own kingdom over there? Well, I was just trying to control it. Oh, really? Yeah, I was just trying to get some management and structure. Well, it shows your incompetence, because if you're trying to manage it, it's unmanageable. It's out of control. It's chaotic. It's destructive. So I don't even believe that. Ernest Bales has betrayed his constituents. He sold us down the river, and we need to send him out of office. And he can do other things other than destroying our lives in our counties and our House district. He puts on a big show. I wonder if the guy's like a sociopath or something. It's amusing hearing people talk to him. He seems so affable, and he's a con man. Ernest Bales is a con man, and he's conned the people of HB 18 far too long. What is a con man? It's somebody who builds your confidence to cheat you, and often to bring you to ruination. That's what Ernest Bales has done. He's a crook, and he's a con man. He sold us out so he can make some little money on the side from his hunting buddy and friend, Trey Harris. And when I win this election, shutting down Colony Ridge, we have to do it. because this is a so-called business model which will destroy not just our state and our nation. And we know that Ernest Bells has been working to flip Texas blue, and this is one of his tactics, through demographic change. Because he was a Democrat. Well, yeah, he is a Democrat. He's a Democrat that ran on the Republican ticket. I had a conversation with a woman. I'm doing campaign work, and I told her, it's like, Ernest Bells supported pro-abortion legislation. Oh no, he didn't. He's pro-life. It's like, look, I'm not making this stuff up. It's all documented. Did you research on what he campaigns as a Republican, he legislates as a Democrat? No, I know his wife, and blah blah blah. It's like, when you support this candidate, you're supporting his policies. So you're supporting his support of an open border, his weakness on abortion, his opposition to Christian and private and schooling and homeschooling, against educational reform. I mean, pretty much everything the Republican Party stands for, he's against. So anyway, I wanted to share these excerpts from, so you can hear me. I didn't get good visuals mostly, but I got audio from this presentation, so you can hear me and Mr. Rousseau speak about these important issues, including Colony Ridge. So thank you, and God bless you.
That's a good order ball. There you go. All right. Look out over the audience. It's like it happened earlier.
Sure. These are not immigrants. These are illegal.
Illegal aliens.
Immigration is a whole separate thing.
I agree with you. And I try to be really careful, but in the course of like a 1 hour speech, sometimes it'll slip. Even we are not immune to propaganda. So we hear the word undocumented, illegal immigrant, and all this kind of stuff, or immigrant, migrants. The technical terminology is, I would say, before they cross the border, they are migrants, and after they cross the border illegally, they are illegal aliens. And that's what I try to stick to 100%. So there's no euphemisms, no confusion, no suggestion of any sort of bias, because I don't have that framework. So.
Let's just real quick, on Senate Bill 4,
Yep.
does that include sanctuary cities?
So this is a different Senate Bill 4. So ironically, there were 2 Senate Bill 4s passed in separate special sessions. In the 3rd special session, that was enhanced penalties for human smuggling and operation of stash house. This one is the creation of state crime for illegal entry. It is enforceable in sanctuary cities. We outlawed sanctuary cities 2 sessions ago, I believe. Now, is a border DA who is run by a Democrat, are they going to really engage in thorough prosecution of this crime?
Yeah, because as far as I know, San Antonio, Houston, Austin, they're still sanctuary cities.
They operate as if they are, even though they're not supposed to.
What do you think about the new speaker?
Of the U.S. House?
Yes.
Mike Johnson.
Mike Johnson?
He's been.
Well, he says the right things. But here's the problem, is the first thing he did was exactly what got Kevin McCarthy ousted, was he engaged in a problem solvers caucus, like the most moderate Republicans and all the Democrats, to do a
Continuing resolution.
continuing resolution. And that sort of conduct should not be tolerated by Republicans. There's a reason that Kevin McCarthy got thrown out, and that's why. We have only one piece of leverage, and that's that we control the U.S. House of Representatives. Therefore, nothing should get through the House that we do not like. And we should be willing to shut down the government. We should be willing to shut down DHS until they stop engaging in these policies that intentionally undermine our federal immigration law. And we've got to be more strong-willed about it. That's the only part we have to play. And you can bet that if the Democrats were in a similar situation, they would do the exact same thing, because they understand power a lot better than Republicans do, and that's got to change. Go ahead.
I had a question around, so I understand that the Border Patrol, the Federal Border Patrol state of Texas, cutting wire, have we considered any lawfare? Is there, or do we have to declare under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 before making that lawfare on that, or?
Ken Paxton actually filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration and to secure a temporary restraining order preventing the Biden administration from destroying those barriers. They largely ignored that temporary restraining order, and then a Bush-appointed judge out in, I believe it was Midland or Odessa, I could be wrong, maybe it was El Paso, lifted that temporary restraining order. So it's gonna continue to work its way through the process. But yeah, Ken Paxton has already filed a bunch of lawsuits in opposition to this. He's filed lawsuits about every one of these illegal parole programs. This is one thing I actually forgot to talk about. In addition to all of this stuff between ports of entry, with the CBP-1 Act, the Biden administration has created these illegal parole schemes where they paroled in over 1 million people since January 2021, using these exceptions that are supposed to be used in a one-off case for humanitarian parole or things like that, where they've made them categorical, where, you know, if you're a family unit from Colombia or Venezuela, then we will parole you in if you use the CBP-1 Act. All of that's illegal, and it's been struck down in court every single time. But by the time one parole scheme is struck down, they've already spun up 2 or 3 other parole schemes. So Ken Paxton has filed lawsuits about that, as well as a host of other things. So the lawfare is already happening, and technically Governor Abbott has stated, and I will take him at his word, that he has declared invasion under Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3. But, you know, like Michael Scott saying, I declare bankruptcy, it's like, it's not operative, it's not, you can't simply declare an invasion without then vesting in the governor's office all of those additional powers that are given to you in Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3. And so that's really the distinction, is, yeah, like whether or not he has declared an invasion, there's no real history of the process other than it's given to the governor. It's his sole jurisdiction in the Texas Constitution. So in my mind, unless there's other governing law, which there's not, about the manner in which he would have to declare it, he could say, I have declared invasion in a letter to anyone, or, you know, in a room by himself. And at that point, he has those additional powers. The problem is that by and large and consistently, he has not taken up those additional powers and applied them to the rule of law. Any other questions? Impeachment? Yeah. Well, and you have to understand there's history there. That the same group of people that are the leadership in the Texas House, a lot of them were in the same inner circle, where there's kind of like a rotating circle of people. Charlie Guerin in particular, with Dennis Fine and with Joe Strauss in particular. And so with Joe Strauss, you had, 11 Republicans teamed up with all the Democrats to oust Craddock from the speakership. And it's kind of been that same sort of situation where, unlike in the U.S. House, all the Democrats vote for the speaker. The only people that don't vote for the speaker are the very, very conservative Republicans. And in this case, I think you had 3. It was like, it was 3 people at the beginning of this session. And so, to really answer your question, yeah, I think that was the reason that Paxton got impeached. Is because Paxton actually, when Joe Strauss was still the speaker, he ran against Joe Strauss for the speakership, and that has engendered enmity between those two factions for, you know, over a decade since. And so that is with all of the complaints against the Attorney General, they are a pretext for going after him because of a personal animus between that faction and Paxton. There will be. Look at the elections in March. There will be consequences.
I got a comment and a question.
Go ahead.
First, I worked on the border with the military for 4 years. I did Operation Secure Texas, Operation Guardian Support, Operation Lionheart, now Operation Lone Star. And it's worse than people can imagine. And of course, pretty much every illegal alien that crosses the border and make a fraudulent asylum claim, they're all getting to stay. And the question is, hasn't Ernest Bales transformed this to a sanctuary district by creating Colony Ridge with House Bill, was it 4341?
So Colony Ridge pre-existed that, and so that was what created the MMD, the Municipal Management District, which gave the developer additional regulatory powers over what was going on and additional authorities. Now, what Ernest Bales claims is that that was actually to try and rein in some of the excesses that were going on in the early part of Colony Ridge. But the reality is that we haven't really, you've seen in some of the newer parts, some nicer homes being developed, but it's still the same sort of scheme. Regardless of the legality of it, I think you really have to consider, is it moral to create a business that advertises as Querenos Houston, that has as its business blurb at the bottom of its website in Spanish, discover the perfect solution to become the owner of your own land in Houston, United States, to charge credit card interest rates to these people who are coming over here illegally, to create a scheme where you don't have to do credit checks, and so you can have plausible deniability of, or abdication of responsibility for the types of people who are living there. And then when you're sort of found out, and then your response is to hire a political consultant who's very, very powerful, very, very connected, and then try and pull all the levers of power that you can through your personal connections, which are meant in order to avoid scrutiny and legislative action on this. And that's exactly what happened.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, another issue is it wasn't even debated.
no, it wasn't.
He snuck it in. If he
But
was
that's
trying
not
to help
unusual.
people, why did he sneak it
What
in?
people need to realize is that these MUDs and these MMDs are like the biggest silent power grab in the state. From a civic governance perspective, it gives people with no oversight whatsoever immense tax authority and regulatory authority over citizens, where sometimes they don't even know the date of elections. In the case of just water districts and things like that, it can be very, very difficult to oust people from power because you might have 3 people that own that actually once it becomes contentious. But yeah, that's not really unusual. I think what's unusual is that the proposed, while that legislation was being debated, the proposed scope was very, very small. And then that MMD is ballooned to an immense size where it's like 30 square miles. And then they've created another MMD number 2 for the new expansion area of that municipal management district. The other thing is who are the presidents of the board? It's
Trey Harris.
Trey Harris is the president of MMD number 1. And MMD number 2 is, what is it? I think it's the superintendent of one of the ISDs up here who are very, very close with the Harris brothers. And then you've got all of the other things that are going on. It's like Ernest Bales, his cousin, is the biggest donor to his campaign, and his cousin happens to own R&T Ellis, which is the primary concrete contractor for all of Colony Ridge. And they use what's called like pressure compacted concrete, and it's never been used large scale for municipal roads like that before. And so they're
failing.
They're built under the cost of the developer, who then turns it over to the county, calling it a donation for maintenance and operations. Well, the problem is that those roads are not built to withstand the type of vehicle traffic that's going to go through those neighborhoods, and so it's going to be a massive cost. The other massive cost is that you've got an explosion in Cleveland ISD. In 2011 to 2012, you had 3,600 students or thereabouts in Cleveland ISD. This most recent year, I believe they started out at 12,400. They're at 11,000 something,
Right.
high 11,000. In addition to that, you've got a charter school system, and these are pretty crazy. They're popping up all over the Houston area. It's not just in Colony Ridge. There's one that's popping up in Pearland. There's one in Richmond. and these are like International Leadership in Texas, which sounds exactly what it is. It's a globalist charter school that's paid for with taxpayer dollars. It's free tuition. And these teach students to be trilingual in English, Spanish, and Mandarin Chinese. And their mission is to create good global citizens. Now think about it. If you're trying to encourage assimilation, you want people that are coming here to be educated in American civics and to be American citizens and sharing our history, our heritage, our values. The last thing you want to do is put these people who are already not going to have English spoken at home in many cases, are going to have a disconnectedness from our civic life by the very nature of the way that they or their parents came to the United States, not respecting our laws or our history at all. But then you're gonna add on to that a globalist perspective of citizenship from these taxpayer-funded charter schools. That's crazy.
Who approved that?
The state did. It was TVA that approved it. And it's because they needed the capacity. Those schools in Cleveland ISD are overrun. They can't hire enough teachers that are bilingual. In fact, they had to bring in teachers on sponsored H-1B visas. So you have illegal immigration into that area that's driving more legal immigration because you can't find enough domestic teachers that are fluent in Spanish. Now, we've got a big problem here. We've got 1.1 million students in Texas public schools with low English proficiency. And we've got these ESL programs that cost us billions of dollars every year that don't result in fluency. What we should be doing is doing English language immersion, making sure all of our students are fluent in English by the time they graduate. Because we don't have that right now. And it's failing, not only is it costly to the taxpayer, it's eroding our job market. It's eroding the job market, it's eroding our sense of civic togetherness, our civic institutions, it's eroding those. But in addition, it's failing the students themselves. It's setting them up to not be able to be as successful as they could, because you're not arming them with the language that is predominantly spoken not only in the state of Texas, but in the United States.
Yeah.
So,
Let's not
it's a
forget,
big problem.
every day in Cleveland ISD, you have one student at least overdosing on drugs, mostly fentanyl. And we got, this report shows Colony Ridge, it's controlled by, was it Sinaloa and Gulf Cartel, or it's already set up over there?
I'm sure that they have territories in there, but Sheriff Rader will tell you that a lot of the problem is that you don't really know how much is going on in there because we have an under-policing issue. We don't have enough sheriff's deputies and we don't have local police going in there. And so what we have is a maximum of 3 officers per shift covering a square, between 30 and 60 square miles. Am I quoting you correctly on that? Okay. And that is vastly under-policed when you look at any of the law enforcement think tanks' guidances to the number of people versus the number of police officers that you ought to have. Now, that's the case in a lot of rural Texas, and that's not a unique challenge to this. But a lot of people try to kind of downplay the severity of this, particularly in the hearings in the Texas House and Texas Senate. Now, I've heard it said that the downtown Austin area that has an additional DPS presence due to Austin defunding the police has a similar population to Colony Ridge, and therefore it's an apples-to-apples comparison comparing the crime rate in downtown Austin to rural Liberty County. That's insane. Population density, we know everywhere in the world has an effect on the crime rates, not just because of the fact that there is some level where people being in close proximity to each other results in more crime, but also because it's much harder to enforce crime over a large area versus a small area when you're talking about the same number of police officers policing the same number of people. And, to their credit, the state did fund continuing DPS presence in Colony Ridge, but we've got to address the heart of the problem. It should not be acceptable to set up a neighborhood that is selling owner-financed loans at credit card interest rates to illegal aliens and having a website that's catered towards that. I mean, do you think it's acceptable to have this in the state of Texas?
No.
I'm
Is this
sorry,
supposed
I
to be
live
in
in
the state of Texas?
No. You live
Do we have this in the state of Texas in our
Not
communities?
Colony Ridge, but I live in one. We got the same situation
Third
going
world
on.
city.
Yeah.
Same situation going on in our area. It has nothing to do with Toronto, Houston, but a guy that's doing the same thing that he's doing.
It's a business model. If we don't stop it, it's going to spread across the whole state and nation.
Got
to vote on this bill, is that off?
It's already being replicated all
Third
over.
world city.
Well, it's in Liberty County, so we
And there
have
are a
two
couple
or
of
three
things,
of
like
them.
developers are very, very powerful in the state of Texas. And they have powerful lobby. And they're usually very wealthy people that are capable of hiring for example, Axiom with Jeff Rowe, very tied into powerful people in Texas politics that are all Republicans, by the way. And so those people have contacts that are able to do a PR spin campaign. I mean, they have a lot of elected officials down to their Potemkin village of the new
Right.
nice part of Colony Ridge that's right next
Oh,
to
so that was
99.
a bus that went down there with all of his little cronies?
A lot of them.
That's who went on that bus tour
Well,
and saw the
it
best
was
part?
some people that were legitimately trying to investigate, but I was not personally on this tour. But I would strongly suspect, and from what I've heard from staffers who were on this tour, it was not structured in a way to fully unmask what's going on in Colorado. And that's a big problem. I mean, look, we can talk about this honestly, and I have not, unlike some other people that have really tried to over-sensationalize this, I've tried to be pretty careful, and where I've misstepped on stuff that I've said, I've tried to correct myself in my public speeches and things like that. But there is a gulf of difference between, hey, some people are saying some things about this community that may not be true, and everything's hunky-dory. We don't need to do anything about this. This can be the model for all of expansion into all of the major urban centers at the fringes of all the major urban centers in the state of Texas and in the United States. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, wonderful. Third world city.
And well into our public comment section.
Not perfect, that's what we wanted. Thank you all.
Any other comments or questions? David, what you writing for? Start up here. Yes, please.
I'm Michelle Marandino. I'm a local attorney running to be your next district attorney.
Wes Hinch, I'm the judge of the County Court of Law #2, and have been since 2020. I'm running for re-election. I'm Bobby Rader, I'm a sheriff of Liberty County. I'm running for re-election.
I'm Karen Dawkinson. I'm running for the precinct chair.
BJ Burton, Kevin Burton, my real name, everybody knows me as BJ. Running for Liberty County Precinct 3 Commissioner.
I'm Kenna Seiler, and I am a lawyer. I practice in Montgomery County, but I am running for the Ninth Court of Appeals, which is Montgomery County, all the counties to the Louisiana state line. Not Chambers County, not Harris County, but certainly Liberty County.
I'm Stephen Missick. I'm running for Texas State Legislature for HD18.
All right. Thank you guys so much for running. Coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Howdy, everybody.
So do you want to be seen or do you want the presentation to be seen? Good?
Yeah, I think this works. It's kind of a happy medium. Everybody can see me, right? President, a Republican Senate, and a Republican Congress. We could not even get wall funding through Congress because there were people on the Republican side of the aisle who were opposed to it. Now, I think that that's ridiculous, and I think that we should hold people accountable. I also think that because of what's happened during the Biden administration, we've moved the Overton window within the Republican Party significantly over to the right. And so we may not face that again, but it's like everything else. I was saying to a gentleman before this that, you know, when we were under the Obama administration, the Republicans in Congress repealed Obamacare how many times? And then we get to the Trump administration and we have the presidency ready to sign it, and suddenly all of them got cold feet, and we ended up having, by one vote, failing to repeal Obamacare, and that was John McCain in the U.S. Senate. So it's yet to be seen what will happen when it's not just performative politics and it will actually mean a change in policy. Now, what I view my mission and the mission of other grassroots organizations and think tanks and things like this on this issue is to hold people to the stance they've already taken, and that's why we pushed so hard for H.R. 2, which was the big bill that passed Congress by a pretty narrow vote, but it was definitely the best piece of border security legislation that has ever come through Congress. And that passed with only 2 Republican no votes through the U.S. Congress, and then the U.S. Senate. They have not considered this bill yet because they don't have the votes for it with Democrat control. But during the debt ceiling negotiation, every single Republican except for one voted for the Marshall Amendment, which would have included all of the policy changes in H.R. 2 in the debt ceiling agreement. And so basically, if it would have gone back over to the House with that in it, it would have passed and all the policy changes would have been exchanged for a debt ceiling increase. And so every single Republican senator and every single Republican representative in Washington is on the record supporting all of these measures. And that's very powerful, but we've got to make sure that we keep up the pressure so these people don't backslide once we actually have to govern. To advertise that you signed our policy pledge. We're going to make endorsements later on down the road, and you signing the pledge is not a guarantee of an endorsement, of course, because we will probably have multiple candidates in a given race that'll sign this pledge. But it just stakes out the positions at the state and the local and the federal level that we expect all of our Republican. What I would say is you should visit my website, strongborders.org. You can follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, @StrongBordersTX. You can share our content. I've got an email list that's been going around the room. If you guys want to sign up, I have a weekly newsletter that has about...
I wanted to plug another event, which is the following week, February the 13th. There is a forum. This is being hosted by the Liberty Vindicator. And I believe another organization that I've got a blank on. But I wanted to make sure you guys knew that both of those are going to be advertised. The party's meet and greet is on the 6th, and the forum is on the 13th. So those are 2 things that are happening pretty close to proximity. All right, I believe that is all I had to say this evening. Yes, Courtney Daniel is available. I'm also available. Courtney, I'm sorry, I forgot to put your number up here, but if you get with me, and I will be putting some information on the website about this, and I'll be mailing out to the candidates who registered, so they have easy access to all that. All right, I don't have any new business on the agenda. Is there any new business from our precinct chairs? Okay, hearing no. Yes, I think that would work in our. All right, that concludes our business portion of the meeting, and our speaker tonight is Mr. Chris Rousseau from Texans for Strong Borders. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. He's going to talk to us about his organization, about the border, and possibly some stuff that's in a little close proximity to Liberty County. So thank you for coming.
Sure
Welcome
thing.
him to the podium, please.
We've had 170 plus countries represented at our southern border, and that's very, very unusual. Generally, in the 90s and 80s, it was primarily immigration from Mexico. As you got into the 2000s and the 2010s, you started having more and more immigration from the Northern Triangle countries in Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and then into the 2010s, you started having more and more, as Venezuela was destabilized, people coming in from Venezuela and places like Haiti. But really, pushing for since last year to work under a legal framework that is a little bit creative, but it's something that we need to push for. And the reason for that is very clear. So the Biden administration has refused to secure our border, which it's obligated to do under Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution. Texas is the only border state with a Republican government. And in light of the refusal of the federal government to secure the border, we can and must act decisively to protect the safety and sovereignty of citizens. So I'll talk a little bit about Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Now raise your hand if you've heard of that, Article 1, Section 10. So it's about a third of the room. So Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution are the powers of the legislature, the federal government's legislature. Section 10 is a list of things that the states are actually precluded from doing without the consent of Congress. But this Clause 3 has an exception. It says, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in time of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war, unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. Now, what I would argue to you is that both of those criteria have been met. Given the quasi-governmental status in many places and the organization and the power of the Mexican drug cartels, what they are doing constitutes an actual invasion. An invasion is not just state actors. It was never defined by the framers as such. In fact, at the 1788 Virginia Ratifying Convention, James Madison, when he was discussing this, said that this would give states the power to suppress smuggling operations. Now, what do we have but the biggest drug and human smuggling operation in the history of our country going on right now at our southern border? So, in addition to that, this is imminent danger as will not admit of delay. We've seen the impacts to our communities. We've seen the impacts to people on the border, and we've seen the impacts to people that are far away from the border. We like to say that every single state is a border state now because of the Biden border crisis and the magnitude of what's been going on. And so the governor in the Texas Constitution is afforded the power to repel invasions under Article 4, Section 7. So what has the state of Texas done so far? In May of 2023, on the night that Title 42, which is the public health order that allowed for expedited deportations or refusal of entry of illegal aliens, expired, you had for the first time down in Cameron County, just outside of Brownsville, Texas DPS and Texas National Guard actually telling Border Patrol, get out of our way. We're going to control this situation now. And in a very limited operation, they set up a concertina wire barrier, they lined up along the river, and they told to the massive group of people across, that was estimated by some to be as big as 12,000 people. And they said, you're not crossing here. You need to go to a port of entry, you're not crossing here. Some people tried to anyway, and they didn't budge. You can see this picture where they're not applying any force, they're just standing there in a line and saying, you're not getting past us. We're not moving. And that set up a couple of other operations that we've seen in a limited capacity in Maverick County near Eagle Pass and a couple of other places. And then in July, we set up the 1,000-foot marine barrier. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the marine barrier. It's no substitute for a permanent border wall, but in some ways, it's very, very good. The problem is mostly that it's a 1,000-foot barrier in a 1,200-mile border. So obviously, to the extent that health systems, on our state health systems, on our schools, there was a Huffines Liberty Foundation study that concluded that between $6 and $7 billion are spent educating the children of illegal aliens annually in our primary and secondary schools. And we see that, right down the road, we've had an explosion in Cleveland ISD in the number of students. And a lot of those people are either recent arrivals themselves or they're the children of recent arrivals. And the other thing is birthright citizenship. These people know that under our faulty interpretation of the 14th Amendment, that was never supposed to apply to illegal immigrants, that if people can come here illegally and have a child, that is a shield from deportation in a lot of cases. And their children are then granted all the privileges and immunities of citizens. And that's taken advantage of not just by illegal aliens, but you have people from China and Russia that engage in what's called birth tourism, where they come in here on a tourist visa and they will have a child in the United States, and then they can leverage that citizenship at some indeterminate point in the future to try and either gain chain migration, admit to the United States, or other benefits from the tax code. So we've got to address all that. we talked about the legislative priorities a little bit in terms of taxpayer-funded subsidies and benefits, but the other things that were in the Republican Party of Texas's platform in their legislative priorities were to call upon the governor to assert his duty under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 to declare an invasion and actually repel that invasion, and then do everything in his power to protect the state of Texas, enter into interstate compacts with other states, which he has done to his credit, and then to eliminate taxpayer-funded benefits. So the 88th legislature has failed to pass substantive border security legislation in the regular session, and then finally in the 4th special session, we got a little bit of significant stuff across the finish line. Let's talk about the regular session first. So Article 1, Section 10, we had HB 20 by Representative Matt Schaefer that would have created a state border protection unit that would have been able to execute that repel and remove mission at the border. And unlike Operation Lone Star, which is extremely resource intensive because you have to pay overtime and per diem, you would actually have a permanent force of people that would operate at the border, much like federal border patrol does. And so you would be able to take that unit and deploy it close to its headquarters in whatever region you have the hot spots. And that was supported, it was made a legislative priority, and unfortunately on the floor, it was killed by a Democrat point of order that was sustained by Speaker Dane Field. And it was a ridiculous reasoning. What they said is that because there was a legislative finding that Article 1, Section 10, the criteria had been met, that the state was in imminent danger. They said that because there was a legislative finding that the state was actually in imminent danger, that was tantamount to the state declaring war. Which no one reasonable would argue that, but we have a parliamentarian, Hugh Brady, who was an Obama lawyer, and that's who Dave Phelan listens to when he's making a lot of these parliamentary pronouncements. And so he killed the bill. And so it was a legislative priority for the Republican Party. It was even a legislative priority for Dave Phelan. It was among the 20 priority bills that he announced at the beginning of the session. But because he's got a deal with the Democrats to be committee chairs and people that are high up in his inner circle, he allowed this bill to die. And they tried to salvage it with a much watered down version of the bill that would have held these operations hostage to county commissioners that had already testified against the bill in committee. That ended up getting killed as well. The Senate and the House could not come to an agreement on that. So it's about a $7 billion annual expense to the state of Texas to educate illegal aliens and the children of illegal aliens. Senator Drew Springer filed a bill that would have asked the federal government for reimbursement for those costs. And so that's a way of challenging Plyer versus Doe, which is a 1982 Supreme Court case that set this precedent. So basically, all of the good stuff that you saw here, all of these bills, they were killed primarily because of the ineffective leadership in the Texas House. Now, there are a couple of bills that were killed in the Texas Senate. I will fully admit that. But those bills, their companions, were also killed in the Texas House. And so any problem that you had in the Texas Senate, it was actually even worse in the Texas House. And for that reason, we called upon Governor Abbott with a huge coalition of conservative groups to try and have all of these different issues on the call for the special session. And this included the HB 20 or similar legislation. Port of entry, you have now committed a crime. You can be arrested for this crime. You're taken before a magistrate, and that magistrate can offer you a deal. They can say, once we've collected all of your DNA and all of your criminal background, make sure that you are not a cartel-affiliated member or a person who's committed a crime in the state of Texas that would be relevant to us now that we have you in custody. We could say, if you're all clear to go, you can agree to be taken by a DPS agent back to a port of entry and ordered to walk back across. Now, if you refuse that order after you've agreed to that deal, it's a second-class felony. which is 2 to 20, I believe, right? 2 to 20 in a state penitentiary. So that's a pretty significant penalty. People are not going to want to have that. If they decide to take the deal, and it's a Class A misdemeanor, which is probably up to 180 days in jail or something like that, at the end of that 180 days, they would be ordered anyway to return on a pain of a second-class felon or a second-degree felon. So the thought is that most people are going to be magistrated, and then they'll agree to those conditions, and then they'll leave. Their kids growing up and becoming voting citizens and things like that. And so that's what my organization is doing. We have a statewide and a federal pledge that we will give out, educate them on the ways to address the border crisis. And if you've got anybody locally that you'd like me to talk to, I'm happy to talk to anyone about what we've recommended and what organizations that we work with that do a lot of research on this issue have recommended in terms of policy changes to help address the crisis. We go around the state talking to people just like you, because a lot of people
Let's all join in as we think in the victory.